Hi, my name is Jane Scarf, and I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And what I want to talk to you today about is martial law, police, and the Canadian Bill of Rights. As you're quite aware, we're in a lot of problems in this country. There's a lot of infiltration going on. Communism is threatening to take hold, complete hold of our country, which would mean we would be losing all of our human rights, because that's what communism is, a state of strong central government, which means government has all the authority and people have nothing, no rights and no voice. And thankfully there's resistance. I can see resistance. In particular, recently we saw very strong resistance coming from our regional police forces across Ontario. 44 out of 44 police services refused to enforce the stay-at-home orders. And they did this because it would be a violation of our rights. And they must be standing on the Canadian Bill of Rights, which doesn't allow any override or any limiting of our rights. Because had they stood on the Charter does allow limits to be put on our rights, and then it's up to us to initiate a constitutional challenge and get the court to agree that it was not reasonable for them to limit our rights in a certain way, and then and only then would our rights resume. So thankfully, those 44 out of 44 regional police services didn't want us to have to go through that very expensive, very time-consuming process to reestablish our rights, and they're respecting our rights right straight up. Now, it doesn't mean that we're out of the water yet, because there's a lot of infiltration of our government, of even the police itself. You can see conflict going on there. I don't know about the military. I don't know how much resistance there is to the communism within the military. I'm expecting that it's quite high, because we've had a culture in Canada of being very careful to respect human rights. Now, it doesn't mean that they've always been respected. There's been violations and there's been abuses and injustice, of course, but overall, we've had a general commitment to respecting human rights as we administer, laws. Like, for example, our criminal code has all of the rights from the Canadian Bill of Rights entrenched in it. You see the limitation on police power relevant to the recognition and the commitment to protect our human rights, which is specified in the Canadian Bill of Rights document right at the just a second, right at the I have a huge copy of it here. I don't know if you can read it here. They're in red. It says this document is an act for the recognition and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. So we don't have that in the Charter. They forgot to add that in the Charter. That's because your Charter rights are very weak, and they're conditional. And Section 1 of the Charter allows the government to override your rights if they think they have a good enough reason to do so. And that's what they're doing now. They're saying this flu pandemic, so-called, with a very low rate of risk, is enough reason to completely suspend all of our human rights. Just everything that is supposed to be recognized and protected in the Canadian Bill of Rights is overridden by bylaws, nonetheless. And it's not legal. It's totally not legal. Thank God we have this Canadian Bill of Rights. If we just had our Charter, we would be in deep doo-doo. So I want people to have a look at the Canadian Bill of Rights. Section 1, it outlines your fundamental rights. And Section 2 specifies that these rights are never to be limited. They're never to be abridged or abrogated or violated in any way. And that condition can only change with a federal act of parliament, which expressly states that your rights are going to be forfeit or withdrawn. And that's not happening. There's no such federal act of parliament. So these rights are firmly established. Now, some people say, oh, well, the Bill of Rights isn't any good because these are provincial regulations that we're dealing with, these emergency orders, so the Bill of Rights has no application. Well, I'm afraid that's absolutely wrong. The Canadian Bill of Rights deals with all matters that come within the federal jurisdiction. Well, just so happens that policing falls within federal jurisdiction, and the Criminal Code of Canada is the way that responsibility is spelled out in law. And as I said before, all the rights in the Canadian Bill of Rights are embedded in the Criminal Code of Canada, and it spells out what police power is, and it's very clear where their limits are, and they have limits with regard to information gathering. For example, it's supposed to only occur if you're being investigated for a criminal offense where there's reasonable and probable cause to believe that you've committed an offense. They can question you. They can ask you for your ID and other information. Or if you're driving and you've violated the Highway Safety Act, then they can ask you for ID. Otherwise, none of their business. And yet, with this bylaw, they're overriding that. They're overriding a piece of federal legislation that falls within the jurisdiction of the federal government, not the provincial government. So it's ultra virus of a bylaw, and thankfully the police recognize that, and they are resisting. Not all police. OPP have committed publicly that they will close your gatherings, which would mean coming in your house if the neighbor said there was 7 people at Christmas dinner instead of 5, and remove everybody from the house and block entry to your house. Yeah, like see how well that fits with the Canadian Bill of Rights? Absolutely not. And smashing into your business, even presuming to have a bylaw that's going to shut down your business and then trying to use the courts to escalate that somehow, that's all illegal. So if you're in violation of any of these bylaws, it's not civil disobedience. It's not civil disobedience to assert your rights. That's well within the law. It's breaking the law. They're breaking the law with these bylaws. So if anything, that's civil disobedience. So I would like everybody to have a look at the Bill of Rights, and in particular look at Section 1, which outlines all your fundamental rights. And in Section 2, you can see where they're not supposed to be limited in any way. So I think we're looking pretty good. We're just starting to hit the courts now with these tickets and charges and so on that have been levied against people for so-called violations of bylaws. And they're using the Canadian Bill of Rights. So this is a very solid way to present. And some people say, oh, that Bill of Rights, oh, well, that's superseded by the Charter. Well, no, it wasn't. In the Charter itself, Section 26, it says that any rights that existed prior to the Charter are still valid. So there are rights in the Canadian Bill of Rights that existed before the Charter, such as property rights, such as this right to have the government recognize and protect your rights at all times with no limits. You had that before the Charter, so you still have that now. Now, it's important that we assert that. If you go into court, like for example, if you get your business shut down and you say, oh, well, that's against my rights, Section 7, whatever, there's several different sections sometimes that are violated when they take those actions. And if you try to go in and use that, You have to do it within the context of a constitutional challenge, which is very, very expensive and time consuming. And it's not quick enough to give you a remedy to solve all of your problems with the city closures and injunctions they're getting and all this stuff. Like they've got you in the corner, like they're doing with Henry Hildebrand. They got injunctions and locked up and everything. And I saw his court case, and the lawyer said, I would prefer if we could deal with the constitutional issues first before all of this that they're doing. And they were doing injunction and breach of court order and requests for police enforcement and locks and all that stuff. And the judge looks at her and says, that's not going to happen. And it didn't happen. They went ahead and made all of their rulings without considering the rights. That's for down the road, they say. Well, by that time you're bankrupt, or you're like if it's a church, your parishioners are scattered, and you can go bankrupt too because they have rent to pay, and there's no service, so there's probably no contributions, or at least diminished contributions from the parishioners. So it's not good. But if they were to go in and cite the Canadian Bill of Rights, they can do that immediately. You don't have to give notice first, and you don't have to wait down the road to deal with it. Right on the spot, you can deal with it. You can say that order to shut my business down violates my Section 1A right. And if it's a church, also, I think it's 1G. I believe it's 1G. And you can do that right on the spot. And I hope that they do start doing that. Otherwise, they're going to sort of establish a routine, or give people the impression that they have a right to do this and that you have no rights. And of course, if we get to the point where we believe that and we act as though we have no rights, then we're in communism then. Because that's what communism is. It's a political state where you have no rights. That's all what it is. It's nothing more, nothing less. They own everything. They make all the rules. You don't get to participate, and you don't get to assert your rights in any way. Your opinions and your needs, all of that are irrelevant. They have other interests that they put before that. And that's what communism is. That's what it's always been. Socialism and communism. Socialism was what they called what was going on in Germany under Hitler. But it's the same thing. The only difference is socialism comes about through an election process. Like Hitler was elected to power. And Austria also, I think they had like 98% of the vote for the Nazi leader that went in there. And then of course once he got in, every democratic process goes out the window, and they establish what they call a strong central government. That's what Trudeau Sr. Was always telling us through his time in office. He would tell you repeatedly that that's what he was doing. He was establishing a strong central government, and one of the things he did to try and promote the overtake of our country by communism was Section 1 of the Charter, and that was a legacy that he left his son with, and now his son is using that to override our rights, and to basically move towards ownership of everything, of all the land and the means of production. That's what all this closure is about. It's to bankrupt small and medium business, and then the government comes in and establishes whatever operations they choose to have in existence, and then we're the wage slaves after that. And if we don't stand up now, it's going to be too late. So you got to find out what your rights are, and you have to start asserting them. And that means in the moment, as well as assert them legally. like take whatever legal actions necessary to make sure that these rights are maintained. This legislation was brought in 1960, and at the time they were promoting it as necessary to enshrine our common law rights in order to protect Canada from invasion of communism. And sure enough, it is really a communist blocker if we use it. If you read it and see what it's about, and start to use it, it will help to save this country. And I'm going to just leave you with one more thought, and that is where do we go from here in terms of our political system? What I'm interested in and I'm supporting is a group of people who are organizing around the issue of independent candidates, like not parties, but like coalitions of independent parties that don't have a party whip and don't have a leader per se. There's no hierarchy. They're all equal, and they all decide what their policies are in relation to what their constituents want. And this will be a really important option that you're going to have in the next provincial election. And I would like you to, do some research. There's a website being developed where the candidates will sign up, and you'll be able to get information about the candidates and contact information, stuff like that. And you may be interested yourself in running. The only criteria is that you have a track record of being an activist, especially in the last year. That if you were involved in activism over all of what's been going on here, that's an important qualification for this position, because we're looking for advocates. We're looking for strong people. We're looking for people that aren't afraid to step up and speak out and really advocate for their constituents and their rights and their needs and so on. So watch for that. It's called Elect and Independent. Elect and Independent. There's a Facebook page already with that name, and the website will be up within the next couple of weeks, so watch for that. Okay, good afternoon.